it by faith and prayer. She was over the missions when we were at Splendor Church. And she would give a report every so often of the missions, what missionaries we were sending money to, what revival they were having in those countries. And she was all into missions. And 2 or 3 times we had missionaries came to Splendor Church, and she would tell Pastor Colbert, don't take them out to eat, I want to personally cook for them. She went and bought a set of dishes one time, just so special for that missionary family. And she was always hands-on, wanting to cook, take care of people and everything. She was just all up about tending to God's business. She taught Sunday school for years. Some kids will probably still remember Sister Sheila from years ago, teaching them in Sunday school. Because she was an awesome teacher, demonstrated the lesson, made it enjoyable, made it fun, got the kids involved, like Sister Sharon, like y'all do here, the videos I see of y'all. That was what was happening in Sunday school. But Sheila was a prayer warrior. And so, anyway, when she was 28 years old, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when they first found this lump, it was right up here in her top part of her breast. And the only thing that we could figure out, when her little boy was probably around 18 months old, something like that, he was sitting in her lap, and you know how babies would do, they kind of threw his head back like that and bumped her. Well, later, a knot come up there, and it become red, like it was something, going wrong. She went to the doctor, and long story short, they went in and did a biopsy, and they said, well, it's not cancer, but we're just going to go in and kind of do a procedure so it won't come back. But when they went in to do that, they run some more tests, and they were gone for a long time, and we were sitting there in the hospital room, and we kept thinking, well, why is it taking so long? Because they said it was just going to be a little procedure and they'd bring her back. Well, when the doctor came out, he told her husband, said, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but Sheila does have cancer, and it's not just one kind. She has 2 kinds of breast cancer. One is just a regular breast cancer, and the other is a fast-growing kind of cancer. And, of course, we all just went to pieces. When we got the word, she was still, hadn't brought her back to the room yet, and we all just began to weep and cry and just was devastated about it. And her husband told Brother Colbert, he said, Brother Colbert, would you please tell Sheila this, because I can't tell her. And Brother Colbert said, yes, I will tell her. Well, when they went to bring her in the room, we stepped out in the hall so they could get by us with the bed. And she looked at us and she said, why are you looking so gloomy? Why I'm so sad? And we just kind of smiled. And then when they got her situated in the bed, Brother Colbert walked up to her and told her, said, Sister Sheila said, we got bad news, you do have cancer. And she just smiled and she looked at it, she said, nothing that God can't take care of. And that was the way she accepted it. Well, later the doctor wanted to go ahead and just remove the breast as a precaution, so it wouldn't come back or go any further. She said, no, you're not going to remove it as a precaution. You're not going to mutilate my body. I'm going to trust God. And so it went on, and later one of the doctors called me at my job one day, and he said, Mom, you're going to have to talk to your daughter to get her to come let us do this surgery, because he said within 2 years it's going to come back and she won't recover. She will die from this cancer. And I said, I can't do that. I got to honor her faith, because she's determined that she's going to trust God. And so, sure enough, about 2 years later, she had symptoms and signs of the cancer being back. But she refused to go to the doctor, and it got really, really bad. I'm not going to go into details about how bad it got, but it was really bad. And we couldn't get her to go to the doctor. And then finally, wee hours one morning, she called me. I had quit work and was staying home taking care of her and the children and doing things. And but before that, one day, we were sitting on the porch swing, and she told me, she said, Mom, God's either got to heal me or take me, because you're having to be here to take care of my kids, my family. And said, I just can't live like this now. She would never miss a church service. I don't care how weak and how sick she was, and she wasn't eating anything. She was living off of ice water. Because every time I'd say, Sheila, you hungry? Would you eat something, baby? No, Mom, just give me some cold water. Just give me some cold water. This went on for a long time. But every time church service said, Mom, help me get dressed. I got to get to church. I got to go hear the Word of God. Even if I have to lay down, Mom, I got to go to church. I said, okay. But one Wednesday night, she was so sick she couldn't make it. And when Brother Cover got word that Sheila wasn't able to come to church, he immediately said, we got to go pray for Sheila. And they did. They came to the house and prayed for her. Well, just a matter of I don't remember, a short period of time, maybe a day or two, she got really, really sick and called me in the wee hours one morning and said, Mom, come get me. And I didn't know why she wanted me to come get her. But I got down there and she was standing out in the yard and she said, Mom, I want to go to your house. I just want to go to your house. I said, okay. But anyway, come to find out, she was just so out of it, she wasn't thinking. She didn't really know what was going on. And I called Brother Corbett. He came to my house. And he told me, he said, Sheila, you got to go to the doctor. And she said, okay. I said, well, we'll go to Cleveland to the doctor. So I took her to Dr. Barnett. After checking her a few minutes, he said, she's got a gallbladder attack. He said, you got to get her to hospital immediately. She's got to go. And so we took her to Galveston, to the hospital. They got her down there and come to find out the gallbladder had already turned to, pancreatitis or something, where you get this poison from your gallbladder. She was near death when we got her there. And so she was there several days before they were able to operate on her. And when they did, they took her breast off and the gallbladder. And the nurse and the doctor was real ugly to her. When they seen she had cancer, they said, why didn't you already have this taken off? And she said, well, I'm trusting God. Well, that doctor, she didn't appreciate that. She didn't like that at all. And so, anyway, when they finally operated on her and brought her out of the operating room, the doctor walked up beside the bed and said, well, I just want to tell you how the surgery went. And Sheila just said, before you tell me, can I ask you something? She said, yeah. She said, that cancer hadn't spread nowhere in my body, had it? She said, it was just a tumor. She said, that's right. There was no cancer. We didn't even have to remove any lymph nodes under your arm, nothing. And she looked at the doctor and said, would you say that's a miracle? She said, yeah. She said, well, God showed me in prayer one night, he had his hand between my breast and my body, and that cancer wasn't going anywhere. And she said, that's the reason I've been trusting God. She said, if I had took it out of God's hand, I probably would die from cancer, but said, I trust in God. And that's the kind of faith she had, and the prayer life that she lived. And what I'm about to tell you then, shortly after that, her and her husband had bought a piece of property there in Plum Grove. It kind of sat at a little bit on the hill. The rest of it went off down toward the river. But they bought it for a cow pasture. But one day, I was there, and she told me, she said, that was about the time they started subdividing. All the things come into Plum Grove, and we heard there was a lot of people going to come into Plum Grove. And we really didn't understand all that was going on, but we knew that they would make a big subdivision in Plum Grove and going to bring in a lot of people. And she said to me one day, said, Mom, we need a church in Plum Grove. It wasn't that we were just at her husband's door. She said, I don't want Brother Colbert to feel bad about this, but she said, Mom, there's going to be enough people come that we're going to need a lot of buildings. She said, God not sending us on. We're not missionaries. We're not going to the mission field to minister to people. God's going to bring them to us. And said, we need a church. And I want to give that piece of property, that hill down there, to build a church. Well, we didn't know, never felt any kind of leading how we was going to get this church or anything about that. We just kind of prayed about it for a long time. And in the meantime, they sold their property and moved up out from Livingston. And but we always prayed. When I'd go up there, Mama, let's pray about a church in Plum Grove. It was always on her mind, we got to have a church in Plum Grove. And then COVID came. And we didn't have any idea that COVID was going to answer our prayers. Saturday, that we got word that the church wasn't going to have any services. Didn't know for how long, but we wasn't going to have any on that next day. I was down at Noble and Paula's house. We all lived on the same little road. Mick and Jake and all of us lived on Enloe Road. And so I said to Noble loved doing Bible studies. Now, Noble had preached some revivals and everything, but he had been in Spindler Church for about 30 years. And never had pastored, never even dreamed he would pastor a church, he said. But he loved doing Bible study. He won a lot of people to God by giving Bible studies. And so I just didn't feel right that we didn't do something for church on Sunday. So I said to him, well, would you just give us a Bible study tomorrow? And I'll cook lunch. He said, yeah. So I called Don and Maria and told them, well, come on, we're going to have lunch at Bible study. So it was 5 of us. Like y'all heard him say that before, it was 5. Well, it was good. The next week, I don't remember if we had visitors that week or not, Paula, do you? But I remember stepping up on the porch about the 2nd or 3rd week there. I remember just as a matter of just saying something like I'm always doing, but I remember stepping up on the porch and I said, well, welcome to Family Worship Center, because it was family. I didn't know that was going to be the name, that they chose to name this, our church. But anyway, it began to grow. People began to hear about it. And different ones say, can we come? Can we come? Yeah. It wasn't long until we outgrew it over in Paula's house. I mean, there was hardly standing room on it. And at that time, Mick and Jake were still going to Cleveland Church. And we have never tried to pull nobody from another church. It's always been, you come because you want to come here, we want you here, and your family, and you are welcome. But we are not going out and trying to get people from other churches that never have. And so then Jake and Mickey had a big kind of a family room, I guess is what you call it, on their house. And they said, well, you can start having church over here in our house. So we moved our little congregation, by then it was getting pretty big, over Jake Mickey's. And by that Easter Sunday, I think we had about 70 people there. And and they said, well, we're going to have to do something about a building. And all this time, during this time, Don and Maria purchased this land with this house and stuff over here. And so one Sunday, as we were talking about what we was going to do about getting this building and where it was going to be, and Don said, I want to give some land. We come up here, he said, I want to give 2 acres. And we came, and right out there, out in that corner out there, we walked up there and we began to say, this is the spot. And we began to dedicate that piece of land to God. And we got pictures of it here somewhere where we came up here that Sunday and dedicated this property to God. And then the men started getting it all dressed and ready. And we had a meeting and I guess we nominated some officials or people that held offices or something. But anyway, they began to work on the property, and then somebody found out we could rent a double wide, like commercial building, like office building, like they put in these chemical plants and stuff from people over here at Splendor. And I believe the rent was like $1,250 a month. We never took up an offer. We never failed to pay the rent. People began to come, more people come, and then the building filled up.